Aether. Pure power. It was like a drug all its own, and she'd had so little over the past year. She leaned against the bar, letting her head fall back, and exhaled a long breath. "I guess you approve." A quick laugh burst from the barkeep. "Want another?" Lorelei held out her goblet. "Much obliged." He filled the cup. "So, what brings you to the priory? You don't wear their robes." Lorelei chuckled and sipped her wine. "I suppose you could say they're gracious enough to look after me." She tried to keep the bitterness. Here she was, stuck on an island in the middle of nowhere, sharing a moment with a barkeep. Well, the barkeep thing wasn't much different from what she had got up to before she had been banished by her parents. It was usually the start of the trouble she created. But then she'd had Aaron to get her out of it. Aaron. An ache filled her chest as his face occupied her mind. She took another drink of her wine as thunder boomed loud enough to rattle the windows. The door of the tavern flung inward, and a tall female with a set of black leathery wings stepped inside. The wind blew through the tavern and caught Lorelei's hair, forcing several brown locks to slip from behind her pointed ears and whip around her face. With a sigh, she pushed them back and leaned forward to study the new female. She was an Anku, a race of winged fairy that had an affinity with death. Her wings draped over her body as she pressed her spindly form against the door to shut it. Her chest heaved as she scanned the tavern. Her gaze passed over Lorelei and landed on the barkeep. The Anku rushed forward, her voice coming out in a hoarse murmur. "Bardo, the Elcar is still out. It's caught in the storm." Bardo paled, his eyes wide. "Ayla, I'm sorry." Ayla shook her head. "I tried to get the nuns on the dock to help bring it in, but they're fighting the storm to bring another ship. They can't save both." She pressed her face in her hands and let out a sob. "My husband and son." It was strange to see. Even with their connection to death, the Anku still grieved the ones they loved. They still felt the loss. Lorelei's chest tightened. Once again, Aaron's face flashed in her mind. This time it was deathly pale as he lay on the brink of death, a death she'd almost caused. Ayla didn't have to lose someone today, not if Lorelei could help it. Lorelei drained the rest of her cup and slammed it on the counter, causing Ayla and Bardo to start. "I'll help." Ayla blinked at her. "Milady, are you a nun? Do you follow one of the paths?" Lorelei glanced at her wine goblet and let out a soft laugh. "Oh, not at all." Bardo's brow furrowed. "How can you help, then?" Lorelei stood and stretched her arms above her head. "I happen to know a little bit of magic, especially elemental. So, I'll bring your husband's boat in."